The sun rose over the town of Ntib with a hazy, gold-tinged arrogance, as if it knew the secrets it would shine upon before the day was done. It was a Wednesday, market day, and already the dirt roads leading to the center of town pulsed with the sound of shuffling feet, wheezing carts, and the chatter of bargain-seeking women. In the thick of it all was Adama, a girl with a face that held far too much resilience for her age. Adama was 17, but walked like someone twice her years. Her mother's sudden death 3 years ago had left a hollow that no prayer, no song, and certainly no comfort from her alcoholic father could fill. Every morning she awoke before dawn to wash dishes in Madame Ngozi's food shed, and every evening she left the market smelling of pepper soup, sweat, and unspoken dreams. That day Adama was rushing. Madame Ngozi had shouted at her for burning the fried plantains, again, and threatened to cut her pay if she didn't get the supplies on time. So she had run barefoot, because her only slippers had split again, across the stalls of Ntib market, clutching a basket that felt heavier than her own heart. But she ran straight into a man dressed in crisp white linen and sunglasses that cost more than what her family made in a year. His name was Nwachukwu, and in Ntib, his name was both whispered and worshipped. Obinna was what the world called new money, the type that arrived fast, loud, and unapologetically cruel. He had risen from a modest beginning, true, but success had scraped all memory of humility from his soul. A billionaire by the age of 36, he had turned real estate into an empire, politics into a puppet show, and Ntib into his personal playground. And Adama, small, ragged, poor Adama, had just spilled pap water on his Italian shoes. The market fell silent. All around her, time seemed to freeze. Women held their mouths. Hawkers turned their heads. And Obinna looked at her with a disgust that burned. "You blind?" he barked, stepping back and examining the stain on his spotless trousers. I'm sorry, sir," Adama stammered, dropping to her knees and trying to clean the stain with her wrapper, though her fingers trembled. "You know how much these trousers cost? I didn't mean. You dirty gutter child," he barked, then raised his hand. There was a sharp, stinging sound. The slap echoed like thunder across the market square. Adama fell to the ground. For a second it was as if no one breathed. Then the murmur started, low and dangerous. "Aha!" a woman said under her breath. "Is he mad? You slapped her? Just like that?" whispered another. Obinna didn't care. He pulled out a silk handkerchief, wiped his hands, and turned to his driver. "Let's go," he said. "This place stinks." And with that he left. Like a king who had squashed a fly, Adama didn't cry. She just stood up slowly, her cheek burning, her dignity shattered. People stared. Some looked away. Others shook their heads with pity. No one helped. She walked back to Madame Ngozi's shop with a blank stare. She said nothing, even when Ngozi shouted at her for being late. But something inside her had changed. That night, after washing the last pot and cleaning her swollen cheek with cold water, Adama sat outside her father's crumbling house and looked at the stars. She didn't wish. She didn't hope. She decided. What no one knew, not Madame Ngozi, not the whispering market women, not even Adama's drunken father, was that the girl everyone called poor was anything but ordinary. Her grandfather, Elder Ikenna Over, had once been one of the most powerful landowners in the region. Before colonial powers came and bartered land for lies, before titles were sold for cheap whiskey, the Overs had ruled over hills and rivers, over secrets and stories. But greed, betrayal, and a brutal land dispute had erased their name from the records and buried their influence in silence. Adama had grown up hearing stories from her mother about ancient scrolls, stolen deeds, and a time when her bloodline held the keys to lands that stretched beyond borders. She hadn't believed them, not really. Not until her mother died and left her a tattered leather journal hidden beneath a floorboard. Inside that journal were names, maps, and something more terrifying than she could have imagined. Proof that Obinna Nwachukwu's empire was built on stolen land. Land that legally still belonged to the Overs. Her family. She had never acted on it. She didn't know how. But after that slap, something in her cracked wide open. The incident spread like wildfire. By the next morning, every corner of Ntib was humming with the same story. The billionaire who slapped a poor girl in public. Obinna, of course, didn't care. In fact, he found it amusing. Let them talk, he scoffed over breakfast to his assistant. They'll move on by tomorrow. These peasants always do. His assistant, a man named Tay who had long ago sold his conscience for a steady salary, nodded obediently. But not everyone forgot. Not Chief Izugana, the town's aging but sharp-eyed traditional ruler. Not Mama Ifeoma, who had once nursed Adama's mother through a fever, and knew the girl's true history. And not Chike, a young lawyer who had returned from Lagos and quietly taken interest in land corruption cases. Behind the scenes, Adama's story was growing teeth. And behind her bruised face was a storm preparing to rise. That weekend, Adama took her mother's journal to Chike. He had been her classmate for one term, before his scholarship took him away. Now he was back, tall, confident, and known in town for challenging powerful men in court. She found him at his small office behind the abandoned post office. His desk was cluttered with papers, and he looked up with a half-smile when she entered. Adama. She hesitated. I want to sue a billionaire, she said, voice steady. He blinked. What? I said I want to sue Obinna Nwachukwu. For assault, and for land theft. Chike didn't laugh. He looked at her for a long moment, saw the bruise on her cheek, saw the fire in her eyes, and slowly leaned back. Sit down, he said. And just like that, the game began. By the end of the week, murmurs turned into rumors, and rumors turned into an anonymous social media post. The girl Obinna slapped is the rightful heir to his empire. It spread like digital wildfire. The town buzzed. Blogs picked it up. A local radio station did a segment. Obinna's PR team scrambled. Who's leaking this nonsense? He growled. Sir, it's just a rumor. Then crush it. Sue anyone. Silence her. I don't care what it costs. But Adama wasn't afraid anymore. She had spent her whole life being overlooked, stepped on, and silenced. But now, for the first time, the world was watching. And behind the headlines and hashtags, behind the girl they thought was just a market maid, a forgotten queen was rising from the dust. Ntibes had always been a place of slow change. The type of town where things moved in whispers, not waves. But Adama's story broke that pattern like a dam snapping under pressure. The girl who had once scrubbed pots and ran barefoot through red dust now sat behind closed doors with a lawyer, plotting the downfall of a billionaire. And the town was watching. The weight of a name. In the small office behind the old post office, Chike laid out documents like battle plans. Adama sat across from him, her fingers gripping her mother's journal like a weapon. You need to understand, he said, tapping a page from the old land registry. This is not just assault. If this document is legitimate, Obinna's biggest estates sit on land that was stolen from your family. We're talking about billions of naira. Adama blinked slowly. So it's real? Yes, Chike said. It's very real. And very dangerous. Dangerous wasn't new to her. Poverty was a predator. It had sat at her table, slept in her bed, and followed her every step like a shadow. But now it had a face, Obinna Nwachukwu. She nodded. Then let's do it. The billionaire's den. Obinna was not a man who tolerated inconvenience. He had built his image with careful precision. Philanthropy here, business panels there. His face had graced newspapers with the headline, Africa's Real Estate Messiah. And now one girl, one barefoot fish-smelling, nobody of a girl, was ruining everything. His office on the 14th floor of the Obencorp Tower was surrounded by tinted glass, and security tighter than a politician's alibi. But the tension inside was thicker than the humidity outside. Sir, his chief of staff said, placing a printout on the table. She's getting legal support. The lawyer's name is Chike Obi. Young but smart. Obinna scanned the report with cold eyes. Chike? The one who fought the state governor's land bill? Yes. Obinna leaned back. Buy him. Or scare him. Either one. The chief of staff hesitated. Sir, he's not easily moved. Then make his family move. And just like that, the rules of the game changed. Winds of war. Chike's tires were slashed the next morning. His sister received a mysterious call that someone was watching her child's school. His landlord suddenly wanted him evicted for a made-up violation. It wasn't hard to connect the dots. Chike walked into his office late that evening, eyes heavy, nerves rattled. Adama was there, cleaning out an old file cabinet. He didn't say anything until she looked up. They've started, he said simply. Adama put the folder down. Then let's start too. She placed a photograph on the desk. It was old, black and white, with 3 men in traditional garb standing beside a land boundary marker. One of the men was her grandfather. Chike stared. Where did you find this? Inside the journal, she said. Behind the back cover. It was stitched in. He took the picture and held it up to the light. This is what we needed. Obinna had power. But Adama had evidence. An offer too clean. A few days later, Adama received a visitor. He came in a black SUV with tinted windows, and wore a suit that screamed Lagos money. He introduced himself as Mr. Tund, a neutral mediator. He smiled. Miss Adama, you've suffered enough. My employer, who shall remain unnamed, feels great remorse. He wants to compensate you. Generously. She didn't blink. How generously? He placed a check on the table. 50 million Nigerian nairas. Adama stared. It was more money than her entire family had seen in 3 generations. But she slid it back. I don't want his money, she said quietly. I want his truth. Mr. Tund's smile faded. Miss Adama, with respect, people like you don't get this kind of opportunity twice. She stood. Then I'll be the first. And that was the last time anyone tried to bribe her directly. The court filing. The day they filed the lawsuit, it rained like the sky was mourning the old Antibes. The crowd outside the high court gates was massive. Vendors, journalists, old women with headscarves, even teenagers with smartphones. All gathered to watch the beginning of something no one had expected. Chike stood beside her as they walked through the gates. You sure about this? He asked. Yes, Adama said. The lawsuit named Obinna Nwachukwu as a defendant in personal assault, unlawful acquisition of ancestral land, fraudulent property development. The papers were signed. The press had their photos. And suddenly, the girl he had slapped was no longer just a girl. She was a national story. The court of public opinion. Within 24 hours, hashtags exploded. Hashtag justice for Adama. Hashtag Obinna the thief. Hashtag from slap to summons. Obinna's team worked double time to spin the story. She's lying. She wants attention. She's a political tool. She's mentally unstable. But it didn't work. Video footage from that market day surfaced. The slap. The silence. Her face. People remembered. And they were angry. Enemies within. But the higher Adama rose, the more danger followed her. Late one night, Chike's office was broken into. Papers were ransacked, but nothing was stolen. Just a warning left on the wall in red spray paint. Drop the case or bury her. He showed Adama the message the next morning. Her hands shook but her voice didn't. Let them bury me, she said. But I'll rise in every headline. Chike stared at her, equal parts pride and fear. You're not just brave. You're a revolution. Mama Ifeoma's secret. Adama knew there were missing pieces. She visited Mama Ifeoma, an old woman with faded tribal marks and a memory like iron. Mama Ifeoma welcomed her with kola nuts and sorrow in her eyes. You are your mother's daughter, she said. I need to know what happened. Why did my family lose everything? Mama Ifeoma sighed. Because your grandfather trusted a snake. Obinna's father, Chief Nwachukwu, was once your grandfather's friend. He betrayed him, framed him for theft, and bribed the colonial officers to take the land. Tears welled in Adama's eyes. And nobody stopped him? People tried. They vanished. Your grandfather died heartbroken. But he left behind truth. And you. She handed Adama a small wrapped bundle. Inside was an original land transfer agreement, handwritten and stamped from 1961. Protect this, Mama Ifeoma said. It is your shield and your sword. Obinna strikes back. Obinna was losing control. His investors were nervous. His wife stopped attending events with him. His face appeared on tabloids not for charity, but for land theft and violence against women. He called a secret meeting. Get me dirt on that girl, he snapped at his fixer. Find her father. Dig into her past. Threaten bribe, I don't care. I want her crushed. The fixer nodded. And before the week ended, Adama's father disappeared. A phone call in the dark. Adama's phone rang at 1:34 a.m. A voice muffled and shaky said, If you want to see your father alive, drop the case. The line went dead. She stood in the dark for a long time, fists clenched. Then she picked up her mother's journal, the old land agreement, and her phone. She didn't cry. She wrote a post instead. They took my father. They want me to be quiet. But I am my mother's voice. I am my grandfather's blood. I will not be silenced. By dawn, the post had 2 million views. And the war for justice had become a war for survival. The world knew her name now. Adama was no longer just the poor girl from the market. She was a living headline, a symbol of the oppressed, and to many, especially the powerful, she was a problem that needed to disappear. But Adama was done being afraid. The slap had woken something ancient in her blood, something her enemies couldn't see but would soon feel. Gone without a trace. Her father's disappearance shattered something inside her. She had lived through hunger, humiliation, and hopelessness, but this was different. This was war. The kind of war that left silence behind. Chike tried to remain calm. We need to report it, he said, pacing across his office, which was now half storage room and half security command center. The police. Adama interrupted him. You think the police will help? The same ones that bow to Obina's convoy. Chike exhaled. We don't have enough leverage. We have the land deed, she snapped. We have his name on a lawsuit. We have the press. And now we have motive. Her eyes were blazing. He took my father. Now I take everything. A deal with the devil. Meanwhile, in a smoky lounge tucked into a private estate outside Lagos, Obina met with someone he swore he'd never deal with. Chief Eakin, known in the underworld as the Jackal. Eakin was a land shark, a fixer, and a phantom whose reach slithered into government offices and traditional councils alike. Where bribes didn't work, blackmail followed. Where blackmail failed, people vanished. Obina needed him now more than ever. You want the girl broken or buried? Eakin asked, sipping palm wine from a clay cup. Obina hesitated. Buried in scandal, not in the ground. She's too visible. Eakin grinned, revealing a gold tooth. Good. I like mess. Let's burn her with her own truth. Obina leaned forward. What do you need? Access. And silence. Obina nodded. And the Jackal got to work. The ghost she never knew. Chike had hired a private investigator. Quiet, paranoid, and excellent. And after 2 weeks of tireless digging, he returned with a folder labeled, Adama's Bloodline. You need to see this, he said, handing it to her. Inside were photos, court transcripts, death certificates, and 2 letters with the Nwachukwu family seal on them. Adama flipped through in silence. The documents told a truth older than she'd imagined. Her great-grandfather had once owned over 400 hectares of ancestral land. Until Obina's father forged land transfer documents in 1963. Her uncle had sued and disappeared 3 months later. Her mother had filed a complaint in 1984. It was never processed. But 3 months after that, she was diagnosed with a mysterious illness and died 2 years later. The sickness hadn't just been cancer. It had been systematic erasure. They've been silencing your bloodline for decades, Chike said. Adama stared at the final photo, her grandfather in chains, being led away by colonial officers. She whispered, they tried to erase us. Now, Chike said, you write us back into history. The smear campaign. The Jackal didn't wait long. First came an anonymous Twitter account, releasing a grainy video of Adama arguing with a man in a compound 2 years ago. The caption read, she has a history of violence. Then came an old schoolmate claiming Adama once stole money from a fundraiser. Then a fake medical report surfaced online, saying she was mentally unstable, showing falsified therapy records from a non-existent clinic. The headlines turned. Adama, brave girl or manipulative liar? Heroine or opportunist? The truth behind the slap girl. Chike punched a wall in frustration. This is manufactured. Adama didn't flinch. Let them talk. The truth doesn't need noise to shine. The letter that broke the game. But the turning point came in a letter. It was delivered by a trembling old man, who showed up at Chike's office one rainy morning. This belonged to your mother, he told Adama. She gave it to me before she died. Said one day you would come for it. Inside the sealed envelope was a letter in her mother's handwriting. It began, my Adama, if you're reading this, then the war I tried to fight has found you. The letter detailed how her mother had collected proof of the land theft, the lies, the bribes, and the names of men who'd enabled the Nwachukwu Empire. The final paragraph included 2 names. Chief Magistrate Ogudu retired. Engineer Kalu Nwachukwu, Obinna's elder brother. Both were still alive. Both had secrets. And one of them was about to talk. It took weeks of coaxing and the threat of media exposure. But eventually, Engineer Kalu agreed to meet. He was tired, ailing, and hated his brother. They met in a private hospital ward. I warned him, Kalu said, voice shaky. Obinna was always ruthless. He wanted to bury your family like dust under concrete. But I kept one thing. He opened a drawer and handed Adama a cassette tape, the kind no one used anymore. What is this? Chike asked. Kalu's eyes glittered. A confession. Their father recorded it the night the land was taken. He knew it was illegal, knew it would burn him, but he kept it as insurance. I took it after he died. Adama's hand trembled as she took it. Kalu added, "This will destroy him." Broadcast to the nation. Adama and Chike contacted the largest independent media house in Abuja. The head producer, already sympathetic to her story, agreed to air the tape, if it was authentic. They converted the cassette and ran audio forensics. It passed every test. 2 days later it aired. Nwachukwu, speaking in broken English and Igbo, confessed to forging land deeds, paying off colonial officers, and using violence to suppress anyone who resisted. I take the land from my bees people, he said. Dem no go talk. I pay. I kill. Na so man build empire. The nation exploded. The fallout. Obinna tried to deny everything. He called it deep fake, propaganda, slander. But it was too late. Investigations were opened. International investors pulled out. His company's stock dropped 60% in 2 days. Protests erupted outside his office. The Nwachukwu family name became poison. The slap that once echoed in silence now roared like thunder. But her father was still missing. The victory was loud, but not complete. Her father was still gone. No phone calls. No ransom. Nothing. One night, while reviewing some old case notes, Chike made a connection. All the people who went missing, they were taken near a piece of land called Ala Aji. It was an abandoned development site owned by Obinna. Government had sealed it off after failed construction. Adama stood. Let's go there. Tonight. A graveyard of secrets. They went with cameras, drones, flashlights, and backup. Ala Aji was quiet, broken, and smelled of rot. In the corner of the compound, near a collapsed storage room, Chike found it first. A buried chain. Then a torn fabric soaked in dried blood. And then, as they dug deeper under cement slabs, they found bones. Not one body. Many. 6 graves. 6 skeletons. Among the dead was her father's wristwatch. A nation weeps. The headlines changed again. Mass grave found on Obinna Nwachukwu's property. Businessman linked to disappearances of activists, landowners. Justice or revenge? Adama's fight uncovers chilling truth. The police had no choice now. Obinna was arrested in front of cameras. His mugshot went viral. And in that moment, Adama finally cried. Not because her father was gone, but because now, the country could no longer look away. It was no longer just Adama's fight. It was Nigeria's conscience on trial. What began as a slap in the marketplace had spiraled into the greatest scandal of the decade. Land theft, disappearances, a mass grave, and a legacy of silenced families. Obinna Nwachukwu had gone from tycoon to inmate. And Adama, the girl he once humiliated without a thought, was now the star witness in the trial that could destroy everything he had built. But power doesn't die quietly. The ghost in the courtroom. The courtroom in Abuja was overflowing with journalists, protesters, and curious citizens. It was being broadcast live, watched in schools, beer parlors, and living rooms across the country. Chike held her hand as she sat at the witness stand. You ready? He whispered. Adama nodded, though her throat was dry and her palms sweaty. The prosecutor stood. State your name. Adama Ifeoma Nwachukwu, she said clearly. A murmur ran through the room. Her middle name was rarely used, but now she wore it like armor, daughter of the stolen land. Obinna stared at her from the defense bench. His once glowing face was gaunt, lips dry, and his hands trembled slightly as he clutched a pen. He didn't expect her to make it this far. Testimony like fire. Adama spoke calmly. She narrated everything, from the day of the slap, to the lawsuit, the smear campaign, her father's disappearance, the mass grave at Ala Aji, and finally, the confession tape of Obina's father. As she spoke, the courtroom swayed with emotion. Tears flowed. Fists clenched. At one point, an old woman in the audience shouted, "She speaks for all of us." The judge had to call for order twice. Obina's lawyer tried to poke holes in her testimony. He accused her of seeking fame, exaggerating trauma, and riding the wave of sympathy. Adama didn't flinch. "Truth does not need pity," she replied. "Only light." Obina's turn. When Obina took the stand, it was a different theater. He played the victim. "I was framed," he said. "This is a political witch hunt. I am not my father." But then came the real bombshell. Obina's own brother, Engineer Kalu, entered the courtroom, escorted by security. He was frail but firm. When asked why he had kept the confession tape for so long, he said, "Because I was afraid. Afraid of what we had done. Afraid of who we had become." Kalu's testimony sealed the deal. He confirmed the land fraud. He admitted to helping cover up the death of 3 men, Adama's uncle included. He wept on the stand. "I want to die clean," he said. "And maybe she can wash us clean." Threats in the dark. That night, Adama received a note slipped under her hotel room door. "Stop, or you won't make it to the final hearing." No name, no fingerprints, just a threat. Chaik wanted to alert the press, but Adama refused. "No more distractions," she said. "They can scare me, but they can't stop the truth." But she didn't sleep that night. Instead, she stood at the window, looking out at the Abuja skyline. Somewhere in the shadows, those who had enabled Obina, silent partners, politicians, criminals, were watching and planning. And one of them was about to strike. The betrayal. 3 days before the final hearing, something unexpected happened. Chaik disappeared. He missed a scheduled press conference. Didn't answer calls. His apartment had been ransacked, but nothing stolen. Then a video was leaked anonymously. It showed Chaik in a private dinner meeting with Chief Ekin, the jackal. In the clip, Chaik was seen shaking hands and accepting an envelope. The caption read, "The activist is just another pawn." The media exploded. Social media turned. Adama's right-hand man is a sellout. Was this all a game? Can we trust her now? For the first time, Adama faltered. Had Chaik betrayed her? Had everything been a lie? The boy who knew. In the middle of her despair, Adama received a call from a little boy named Toby. He was the son of the security guard who worked at the Ala Aji site. "I found something," he whispered, scared. "Under Papa's bed." He sounded terrified. Adama rushed to their flat. Toby handed her a box. Inside, a burner phone, photos of Chaik in chains, a voice message. She played it. It was Chaik's voice, weak but clear. "They took me. It's not me in the video. It's deepfake. I didn't betray you. I'm sorry, Adama." The timestamp was 12 hours ago. He was still alive. The rescue mission. Adama couldn't go to the police. Too many were compromised. Instead, she turned to a group of rogue journalists, tech-savvy whistleblowers, and one ex-military friend of her father, Captain Bako. They tracked the burner phone signal to an abandoned warehouse outside Minna. At dawn they moved in. There were guards, but they were no match for Bako and his team. They found Chaik locked in a basement, dehydrated and weak, but alive. He clung to her. "I thought I was dead." "You almost were," she whispered. They escaped without a trace. And now, the final hearing had a new witness. The verdict. The final day of the trial. The judge entered. The court stood. Chaik testified to the kidnapping, to the deepfake, to the ongoing threats from Chief Ekin's camp. He named names, described rooms, provided voice recordings. And when the judge turned to Obina for final words, he simply said, "I regret trusting people. I did not kill anyone." But no one believed him anymore. Not after the mass graves. Not after the confession tape. Not after the silence of so many years. "Guilty." The judge's voice echoed like a drumbeat. "Obina Nwachukwu, you are found guilty of land fraud, obstruction of justice, conspiracy to commit murder, and multiple counts of abduction." A scream broke from the crowd. Obina's mother, wailing in disbelief. Adama stared at him. He looked small now, shriveled, powerless. The man who once slapped her like she was dirt would now rot behind bars. Justice. Outside, the press swarmed her. Adama, how do you feel? Do you think this changes Nigeria? Was it worth it? She looked at them all. I didn't win, she said. We all did. But deep down she knew. Justice doesn't erase the dead. It only ensures their silence doesn't go unanswered. A slap. That was all it had taken. One man's ego. One girl's shame. One public humiliation that snowballed into a reckoning too loud to be buried. Nwachukwu was in prison now. But the war wasn't over. Adama had won a battle. But in doing so, she'd stepped into something much bigger than revenge. She had become a symbol. And Nigeria was watching her next move. After the headlines fade, 3 months after the trial, the media buzz died down. The hashtags slowed. The protest signs were folded away. But Adama couldn't go back to being invisible. Reporters still trailed her. Strangers greeted her like an old friend. People whispered her name like it was holy. Sometimes she missed the quiet of her former life. But there was no going back. She stood outside the ruins of Ala Aji one morning, where the graves had been uncovered. There was a crowd. Families of the lost. Mothers with wrinkled hands. Children with framed photos. Men who hadn't cried in years until now. They didn't come for her fame. They came because her fire had lit theirs. The foundation. Chike stood beside her, recovered but still scarred. Are you sure about this? He asked. Adama nodded. They were opening the Ifeoma Justice Foundation, named after her mother, the woman who taught her to never let pain make her cruel. The foundation would offer free legal support to victims of land theft, fight against corrupt acquisition deals, build schools and clinics in neglected rural areas. The first plaque was laid under a mango tree. A little boy asked, "Will they come back now?" The ghosts. Adama knelt beside him. They never left, she said. They've just been waiting to be heard. Whispers from the top. Behind the scenes, some were not happy. Obina's allies still held power. Bankers, politicians, retired generals. They couldn't undo the trial. But they could make her disappear. Suddenly, funding for the foundation was blocked. Applications for permits were lost. Her bank account was frozen twice. Then in a radio interview, an anonymous caller said, the girl should stay in her lane, or she might find herself next to her father. Adama smiled grimly. They were still trying to scare her. Good. It meant they were still afraid. The real fight begins. The foundation partnered with a global legal team and got international attention. BBC ran a documentary titled, Slapped into History, The Girl Who Wouldn't Stay Silent. She was invited to Geneva, then New York, then Nairobi. But she didn't chase spotlights. Her goal stayed local. In Okboro, she built the first truth well, a public memorial where people could come and write the names of the dead the government refused to acknowledge. Over 3,000 names were etched in just 2 weeks. Adama would sit there some evenings, reading every name out loud. It became a ritual, a mourning, a resistance. Obina in chains. Meanwhile, Nwachukwu was in Kuje prison, under heavy surveillance. But money still buys comfort. He had a special cell, special meals, even access to his lawyers. Until a viral leak shook everything again. A prison guard recorded a secret meeting between Obina and Chief Ekin. In the video, Obina said, I should have killed that girl when I had the chance. The backlash was nuclear. Human rights organizations called for his isolation. His remaining businesses were seized. His last supporters melted into silence. And for the first time, Adama didn't feel rage. She felt nothing, because monsters eventually rot themselves. The letter. One rainy night, she received a letter. It was handwritten old-fashioned. From Engineer Kalu, Obina's brother. He was dying. Cancer. In the letter, he confessed even more. Land deals Obina was never punished for. Judges who took bribes. And finally, the location of her father's remains. She traveled alone. It was in a quiet bush behind an abandoned farm. There, under the roots of a massive baobab, she found the bones. The DNA matched. She sat with the remains for hours. Not crying, just breathing. Then she whispered, I found you, Papa. And the wind stirred as if he heard her. A name reborn. The next day, Adama legally changed her name. She dropped Nwachukwu, took her mother's maiden name, Adama Ifeoma Okeke. The papers called it a rebirth. But for her, it was a funeral for the girl who was once slapped like she didn't matter. She was no longer the girl who was humiliated. She was a name now carried in law books, student protests, and dinner table arguments. And she intended to build something with it. 10 years later, Adama sat before a crowd of students at the University of Ibadan, now a guest lecturer on human rights. She had streaks of gray in her hair, a calmness in her voice, and eyes that still held fire. A young girl stood to ask a question. Do you ever regret what you started? Adama smiled. I regret the pain. I regret the lives lost. But do I regret rising? She paused. No, I regret nothing that gave silence a voice. Legacy. The story of that marketplace slap was now part of history books. Students studied the trial in law school. Villages taught children about Adama as a lesson in courage. And in Akbaro, they built a statue, not of Adama herself, but of a faceless girl standing upright while a hand reached out to slap her, paused in midair. Beneath it a plaque read, "You may try to strike us, but we will rise louder." The girl who was humiliated. She was humiliated in public. Disgraced, mocked, attacked. But she rose. And because of her, headlines were rewritten. Because of her, a nation remembered its buried voices. Because of her, the poor saw themselves not as forgotten, but as fire waiting to ignite. This was never just her story. It was everyone's.